Great. Well, thank you very much. I can't see any of you from here, but the lights are rather bright. But I'm very happy to be here. And what I will talk about is that how, in fact, combination of education and wise government policies that are highly appreciated by the government sector, then turn out to really have a wonderfully synergetic effect, creating a new country out of what was at one time a dismal, backward former Soviet republic, and now is known as Estonia. I recently read an interview in VC, a venture capitalist magazine, interviewing a venture capitalist, fairly obviously, and in it he was asked about where he invested, and then the questions got around, do you ever invest in Europe? And he said, nah, nothing much happening in Europe, except, well, there's London, and then there's a very funny place called Estonia. And there's a reason for it. The Economist recently claimed we have more startups per capita than any other country in the world. We've been called the Silicon Valley of the North. Skype was born in Estonia by 4 kids. Well, these are young men who, after they were under indictment for inventing Kazaa, a file swapping program, then they realized that in fact the program underlying Kazaa was essentially, sort of analogous to what you needed for voice over internet protocols, and in fact then went on to invest Skype with some very good investment from some Danes and Swedes, but nonetheless it is probably the best known Estonian invention, and to this day, even though it's been bought for $8 billion by Microsoft, R&D still keeps its home there. The money, unfortunately, goes to Washington State. But anyway, and because of a number of reasons, Tallinn, the capital of Estonia today, is in addition to being the home of Skype and being one of the most, having the most startups per capita, according to at least The Economist. I don't know where they got the numbers, but it's also the home of the NATO Center for Excellence in Cybersecurity, and also the European Union Agency for IT Systems. It's all there for a reason, and that's because of the advancement of the country, or how far the country has gone. Some simple statistics, and everything is covered by Wi-Fi. The entire country, that is. 98% of bank transactions have been done online for over 20 years. 25% of the population voted online, and that really is online, not with just electronic machines in a voting booth, but really online. In our last elections, we have a vast array of services online, including, say, we have digital prescriptions where no one has paper prescriptions with a doctor's scrawl on it. The doctor writes it in his computer, and then you can go anywhere in the country and get your medicine because it's all online. Everyone owns their own data, so you have everyone can see their medical records. So that's all due to the rather sophisticated IT solutions we found. I think we have solved the traditional dilemma of security versus internet freedom. It's traditional, but anyway, the one that's all in the news today with the NSA. At least in Estonia, every citizen and resident over the age of 16 can write mails to whoever he wants and who has the same ID card without the NSA ever breaking in, because we have two-factor public key infrastructure, if that means anything to you, with 2048-bit encryption. That all sounds like mumbo jumbo, but let's put it this way: Lavabit is a was an encryption service that offered only 512K encryption, 4 times less, and they were shut down because they couldn't be broken into. So if you want secure communication, you come to my country. And on top of that, we are number 1. This way, I always do congratulate the United States for being number 2 in internet freedom. But how do we get there is the question, and here this does tie into the whole issue of youth. The problem we faced when we reestablished our independence in 1991 was that because we had been occupied by the Soviet Union, we just had been basically, development and growth had been stunted for 50 years. We were stuck with the same infrastructure we'd had before, and it became quite clear that, in fact, it would take a long time to build all the roads, bridges, overpasses, and all the other good stuff that you need for the physical infrastructure. But at the same time, it was in 91, 92, 93. Mosaic was just invented as the first web browser. People were going online. And then a bunch of people, I included, had various ideas about what we should do. And I think the main idea was that, well, at least in one area, backward as we are, we could start on a level playing field, and that was in IT. And there were a couple of other motivations that I had personally. One was that I was extremely fortunate that I was taught to program where, when I grew up here nearby in Leonia, New Jersey, which you can still tell from my accent, I was taught to program because I had a wild mathematics teacher who thought it would be very cool to teach kids how to program. And in fact, I did learn to program, and a skill which I used later when I was in college as well on my work-study job. Okay, it's not very useful for me today because I was in 1975, 76, I was programming a PDP-8, an assembler language, which is it's a language no one uses, and the PDP-8 was something about this big, and it only had 8K of memory. That's why I had to use assembler language. But I mean, what I took away from that was that, in fact, kids can learn how to use computers. Kids can learn how to program. And so one of the ideas I had was that we should start teaching kids to program at an early age and how to use computers and so forth. The other thing that really was motivational was reading a neo-Marxist Luddite book by otherwise a very smart man named Jeremy Rifkin, in which it was a Luddite book called The End of Work, arguing that computers and automatization are really terrible because people won't have any jobs anymore because machines will do it for them, which may or may not be true, but nonetheless, this was the sort of idea that he had. And I read this, and he brings an example of a steel plant in Kentucky that employed 12,000 people producing X million tons of steel, which was then bought by the Japanese, completely automatized and computerized. And then the steel plant continued to produce X million tons of steel, however much it was, but it only had 120 employees. And of course, this is all very terrible, except if you're a country the size of mine. And you recall this is the age everyone was talking about how important economies of scale are. This is in the early 90s, and we, of course, our existential angst has to do with the fact that there are so few of us, 1.3 million. What are we going to do? How are we going to compete? And so my idea was that basically, let's put everything into computers that computers can do, so we'll liberate people to do things that computers can't do. Now, how to do this? What do you do? Well, what you do, what I argued, and a couple other people fortunately supported me and found the money in the state budget for it, was to connect up all the schools, put computers in all schools, and let the kids whack away at computers and give them a little education in computers. And it was kind of a wild gamble because all educational reforms traditionally take 15 years at least to take effect. So if you do something in the early, middle 90s, then, well, you start seeing an effect around 2008, 2009, and that's really what happened. Today, I would say, beginning with Skype, which became then a model for all kinds of was a role model for all kinds of kids who saw that, well, with a little brains, a little bit of programming knowledge, and then creativity and an entrepreneurial spirit, you can, in fact, do a lot. And, in fact, that's what has happened. And so today, we do have this reputation of being extremely advanced, and rightly so, because I don't think very many countries have a level of societal and governmental computerization that we have. Now, what's the lesson in this? Well, it's that basically, if you want to transform a society, and you have to start with the young people, you have to focus on the young people, and you have to give them the kind of education that allow them to handle what's happening in the future, or what you think will happen in the future. Of course, you could sort of mess up and invest in the wrong things, but we fortunately invested in the right things and have made IT and science education, put that in the core of much of our education. Today, in Estonia, we now start teaching kids in first grade how to program. Not everyone, they have the choice of doing it, they don't have to do it, but nonetheless, kids do have the choice, and the classes are overbooked. We can't keep the kids away from it. And of course, we already have a program where kids start learning foreign languages in first or second grade. Computer languages are far more logical than any human language, so they're doing rather well. So with the kids involved and with the kinds of government programs we have, and the kinds of approach to governance where we really try to offer as many secure services online as possible, more so than anyone else, I'd say, right now in the world. You have transformed a small, dingy, backward former Soviet republic into a country that is at the forefront of innovation in IT today. One very crucial innovation which you need a government for, so that the private sector can do things easily, is that we have a digital signature law, the first one actually in the world, by which you can in fact have sign legal documents online with a digital signature. That, of course, is a huge boon to business, because in fact the average time for registering a company in my country is 15 minutes. It's 15 minutes because as soon as if you do a digital signature, of which we have had already 140 million in the last 3 years, you can immediately do all the checks for a company. Has the board, does anyone on the board have a criminal record? Does anyone on the board, have all the people paid their taxes? Are there any unpaid debts or outstanding debts on the part of the board members? All of this stuff is done like that. Whereas if you do it on paper, then it takes weeks, sometimes months, several countries many months, which of course then is a huge boon to business. This is a perfect example of the kind of public-private partnership that you actually will need in the future for effective businesses, because in fact it is something that only a government can actually do, because you do have to register your company, and all the checks that have to be done are done by the government, but the idea is to make life easier and easy for the private sector. And this is where I think we have made huge advances for our business, and certainly the business community is extremely thrilled about the services that the government offers.